I think another really big issue is having a lack of buy-in, especially at the right levels, lack of buy-in at the leadership level, because it's an investment. You have to think differently. You've got processes that you need to process differently. And if you don't have support at the right levels, it's going to be really hard to get that partnership where you need it to make that change happen.
I agree totally. Yeah, lack of support from even just the other business units, procurement, staffing of support inventory, all those sort of things. And even your engineers who are taking drives in and out or adding stacks to a cage and to a rack. All those changes that go on, you got to get all those people involved in caring about this. Otherwise, you'll never ever win. Hey, Still, thanks for joining me. Not sure about you, but I'm excited about this topic. In this episode, I think we're going to dive into how CMDBs just go wrong. From messy relationships, stale data, over engineered designs, poor governance. Maybe we'll just unpack just some horror stories, maybe talk about some root causes, or maybe just find out how to stop your CMDB from becoming your biggest operational risk. From stop it from becoming a miracle to a risk.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic. And I think we can talk about the things that go wrong and focus on that before
hmm
talking about the things that go right, make it work well, and some of those best practices, probably in a later episode. When I think about the CMDB, the analogy that I like to use is it's like a house. It is tracking all the things that you own, helping you keep track of all those things that you own. Uh, it is the plumbing, it is the electrical, it is an investment. And if you don't maintain and manage this investment, things go wrong. They become more difficult to manage. So let's talk about those things that tend to go wrong. So, and cause your CMDB to go wrong. Lack of clear objectives and planning, kind of a vague vision or lack of a vision. It's really hard to get to a target when you're not really sure where it is.
Or even over planning or over setting up what your objectives are, overdoing it, trying to, boil the ocean idea. That's sometimes, to me, they kind of go hand in hand, as far as you went into it, just jumped in, thought you just wiped through it, or did you overplan so much that you can't even get started?
And that would lead to things like scope creep, the lack of discipline there. And as you go into a CMDB project, I hate to think of CMDB as a project because it's this thing that never ends. You're constantly working on maintaining it, but it is important that you are building towards some kind of vision. I think another really big issue is having a lack of buy-in, especially at the right levels, lack of buy-in at the leadership level, because it's an investment. You have to think differently. You've got processes that you need to process differently. And if you don't have support at the right levels, it's going to be really hard to get that partnership where you need it to make that change happen.
Yeah, lack of support from even just the other business units, procurement, staffing of support inventory, all those sort of things. And even your engineers who are taking drives in and out or adding stacks to a cage and to a rack, all those changes that go on, you got to get all those people involved in caring about this. Otherwise, you'll never win.
Trying to figure out all the dependencies that you have, what it takes to deliver a service
hmm
without that support, collaboration, buy-in. Uh, there's going to be some piece of that is in the dark. No automation or a lack of automation, bringing in a bunch of manual sources. That's always a big thing for me is what is that source of data? How did it get in there? And then why are we uploading spreadsheets instead of connecting with Discovery or using some type of automation to bring that data in, which erodes trust at some point. At the end of the day, it's data that's in the system. And if you are using manual sources, you have a lack of governance in your processes, or you don't have a really good cadence in updating that data, you're going to lose trust. And once you've lost trust, it's like the final domino. in the CMDB. So let's kind of go through and break some of those down. I know we went through those kind of quick. So I think the first thing that we could go through is talking about the relationships in the CMDB. It's one of those key pieces which connects and ties all the data. So we know when we're looking at an application or service, we're aware of what helps deliver it. So I think that's the first one that we can kind of go through and tackle. So I think what's really important with the relationships is that you have whatever your automation tool is, it's also building those and taking those into consideration. I know one of my personal favorites, ServiceNow Discovery, one of the cool things that it does is not only brings in the information, it builds the relationships for you. I don't know that many folks do this, but when the data comes in and those relationships are created, like actually going in and seeing which relationships are used really helps drive understanding in kind of what's consuming what.
What about tying
I
in
just
tools like SCCM, Intune, Azure AD, Tanium, Logic Monitor, all these
Mhm.
things that have a real thick maintenance relationship, depth of tech, that you know what's in those servers, you know what's in those PCs, laptops, things like that. Do you use those? Or would you rather use Discovery because of the automate just talking about ServiceNow as an example, there's
Yeah.
tons of places out there you can do CMDB with, but just because you and I both know ServiceNow, using that as an example, do you use Discovery or do you lean on that with these other tools, or does other tools muddy the view up? How do you feel about those?
So, I mean, from an architecture perspective, discovery isn't a silver bullet. You can take a multiple tools approach. I like to keep it as simple as possible. So if I can use ServiceNow to do it, that's kind of my preference. And in ServiceNow itself, there's multiple different tools or methods to actually do the discovery. You can have event-based discovery. They have cloud-native operations. So for discovering things like containers, Kubernetes, that kind of stuff, you've got your IP-based discovery with just discovery. There's cloud-based discovery. And not having to create those relationships, being able to leverage what ServiceNow has already architected in the CSDM, making sure the right data is going to the right spot, just makes life simpler. If you are using other tools, just make sure they're creating the relationships and that those items are being mapped so that you have that dependency map. If you don't have the dependencies, you don't have the visibility into what it takes to deliver that application, those services, or what infrastructure is required. When you have a upgrade, when you have a change, how do you know what the impact is unless everything is tied together? And I think that's the most important point about having your devices related to each other.
It's that relationship to me is the hardest part to tie in.
Mhm.
And it is nice that ServiceNow's automatic or automation and things like that that they have can help you with these things. Because
Mhm.
first thing I do is I think I don't want to do discovery because I'm gonna get a bunch of IP. I'm gonna discover these objects IP, and they're gonna be little standalone pegs in my map, no relationship, no dependencies. I just see it. And I'm thinking that in SECM, Intune, Logic Monitor, whatever they're using inside, they're doing the work to build those relationships,
Mhm.
but are they? You know what I mean? It's almost like, okay, now I got to manage that one too and just make sure that it's doing what's right. Because all I need is a bunch of information I don't know anything about being dumped into my CMDB. And so I don't know what the ingredients are per se. And it just makes bad soup, right?
Yes. That's a great analogy. I feel like there's going to be some t-shirt designs coming out of this episode. Yeah. So,
No soup for you.
I,
That's the soup Nazi, right? No
yeah,
soup.
yeah, right. No soup for you.
But I mean, it's all about integrity
Hmm.
and making sure people, I really don't want to force people to do more than they're doing today. You won't get it done. I need to help. Everything I do has to be something that helps them. I might put constraints and guardrails but I don't want to make them do more work than they're already doing. Otherwise, it's going to fail. And
If
so
you're
that to me, that's the key.
if you're not gonna use the data, if you don't have a use case for that data being in the system, there's not a cost decision against it, and it's never gonna have an outage incident against it. It's never gonna be on a dependency map. Nobody's actually going to manage the metadata of that. Never gonna be audited. Don't bring it into the CMDB. You should only be bringing things in that you care about managing. If you just take the boil the ocean approach, bring in everything all at once, you are just creating a dumping ground of data that isn't going to be useful, and it's going to create more noise and do more harm than good. So, starting small, scoping out, and just focusing on what's going to bring value is how you can avoid the dumping ground. But that's a very, very common one. You set up a discovery schedule or you set up your automation tools and they're just scanning, they're bringing data in. Somebody has to manage that. There's got to be some kind of filter to make sure, hey, this process that we set up, yep, it's still good. It's still working like we expect. And then if some other tool down the line what has precedence? What's the authoritative source? And then are you getting that data from a good source?
So when I
But yeah,
think of this,
super.
tell me, tell me what you think of this. So I think of two values for CMDB on my end. This goes beyond what do you call hardware asset management, software asset management, knowing what you have, inventory, securing the inventory, purchasing renewals, lease agreements. Throw that away for a minute. Just the values of having to know what these pieces are and their relationships. I have two examples. One of them is I have a data center that goes black, power outage, PDU goes out. I want to know what's that going to affect, right? I want to see the red light, green lights in a sense, right? I want to see the depends when that PDU, what depends on that PDU. And maybe that should be my vulnerability that I need to have, okay, some dual going on because shouldn't happen. The second example, and you can talk to each of these. The second example is help desk. I mean, when you and I used to work together, we had some examples where we were chasing down these laptops that were just erroring. So we would just re-image another laptop, give it to a person, another user, that bad laptop kept floating around. Well, because I knew about that laptop, I knew the help desk tickets according to that laptop, I was able to find out, wait a minute, bad memory board.
Mhm.
That's the problem. It wasn't the user, it wasn't the image, all these different things that you would chase in the beginning. So to me, seemed to be in a value proposition, help desk with the users and equipment, help desk service problems there, and also outages, patch plans. If I want to take this server down, who does it affect? Right. So do you see CMDB helping in those situations for the business?
I would say if you've got the data population, if you know what your sources for that data is, and you're able to get it reliably into the CMDB to where the data is not stale, then yes, it can help you. If you're just dumping the data in, if you're not paying attention to the relationships that are being created, if you don't have a good cadence for governance, then you're not going to be able to hit those value
Right. You'll
propositions.
never win those. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. If your
And
CMDB is 60% accurate, I'll get it right over the 50% line. If it's 60% accurate, would you still call it the source of truth? What's your number?
there's going to be different schools of thought on this, especially with environments that are ephemeral, like your Kubernetes environment. Something gets spun up, a couple minutes, it's alive, then it's spun down. And so even if you have a really healthy CMDB in environments like that, given points of time, you may be only a certain lower percentage than you thought of completeness. But I think what's key is being plugged into those sources and understanding when you need to refresh. And if the person making the decisions, either tracking the workloads, being able to they're able to answer the question of what's impacted, who's impacted, then that's successful. So I think it's you achieving the mission that you set out, set out to achieve? Are you achieving the outcomes that you set out to achieve? If the answer to those questions is yes, then I'd say you're successful. So I think it's achieving the so what and achieving those metrics that makes it successful. It's hard to put a percentage on it. I would like to think that it's higher than 60%, but it's really enabling associates to be able to achieve those outcomes.
Okay.
That's seems like a very kind of diplomatic answer. It's hard to say, oh, 80%, 80-20 rule, 90%.
Right. Right.
I think, do you have enough data to be able to achieve what you wanted to achieve with CMDB? I'd say if yes, then you're successful.
So we talked about lack of leadership buy-in. To me, you need to have these stories, the help desk story, the server story, the outages, the dependencies there. You need to have, you know, three, maybe three stories to tell in order to get someone to see. If I just say I want a clean CMDB, I want to have my assets in there, I want to see everything, I want to have, if I just bark those no one's going to get, all they're going to hear is work, 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 more work. I ain't got time. I ain't got time. But if I talk about these scenarios of help desk and how it helps manage situations with users, or if I talk about the servers and the relationships to power and outages and patching and things like that, they can
Mhm.
see that and say, wait a minute, we just had one of those. We expected to do, we took the VMware whatever down, and but yet the accounting server they were trying to upgrade was on one of those, hosts at the same time. That clash, right? And unless and spreadsheets don't work. I will get into spreadsheets here in a minute, but don't you
I
need to
hope
have
you
those
don't.
don't you need to have those stories though in order to get not only leadership buy-in, but team member buy-in so they
I,
can visualize it?
when they get called at 2 or 3 in the morning,
Yeah,
that usually gets you the buy-in.
yeah, yeah. I agree.
It's the battle scars, unfortunately, that really help with that. But I think it's being able to paint the picture of those use cases really clear from value proposition perspective for leadership to drive that buy-in. And usually it's just asking a couple questions that are really difficult to answer without that. If this application or this server goes down or this IP address has a DNS error, who's impacted? Well, one third of the internet, to quote recent events.
Yeah. I was thinking about going to our change manager and just asking him, okay, I've got these three changes I want to do hypothetically, and just ask
Mhm.
him, give him three things. And I know in my head when I give it to him, they're stacked. They have a relationship to each other. So it's a trick question. And I'm going to ask him, would you say these are safe to do this weekend? And if he was to say, well, from what I know, I guess, yeah. Then you say, well, this is on top of this. This sits in depending on this. It won't work. You'll have a train wreck, right? And I think those are the situations they need to think about is about making their life easier. Why do you want to take a Saturday to do patch weekend, and all you're going to do is put out fires all weekend? You know what I mean? And get complaints from accounting because they're trying to do end of month. Whatever those things are. Okay, spreadsheets. Would you ever import a spreadsheet when you have discovery tools available to you and haven't turned them on yet, haven't used them yet, but would you ever start your CMDB with a spreadsheet of assets versus discovering them?
See, I can play devil's advocate here, and I can say yes for things that aren't necessarily CMDB related, but still live there. Things that you can't discover,
I
business
get that
applications,
monitors or something
business
like that.
capabilities.
That's perfect. You're right. We're talking about live ping discoverable items. Would you dump them
So
in to get started? That's the temptation. So I got a good spreadsheet. I'm going to dump all my computers, my servers, all
yeah,
in there.
no. So what you're doing there is you're creating obsolete rework, essentially. You want to see what it looks like really quickly and see that value fast. But why is that valuable? That's an obsolete spreadsheet that you just dumped in that's not tied to any data source. And so when you go through and do a change on that, it's also not truly really connected to anything.
Hmm.
If you want to have the value that CMDB is supposed to provide, You need to connect it to the data sources, and then that data has to be updating in real time. You're not getting that from a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I
And then
agree
some
too.
people probably will constantly say, "Oh yeah, well I'll just have that spreadsheet constantly refreshed with data, and then keep uploading the spreadsheet." No, no, no. Just connect the systems. So avoid. I would avoid. Don't do it. Be thoughtful in your approach. Start small, scale out, and then you will avoid at least that pitfall.
Okay, so now we're going through this. We're thinking of start small, don't boil the ocean, right?
Mhm.
Take something valuable, something that means something to you. Take a section of the assets, maybe a section of the IP range or something like that. You're going after this first. Kind of figure out what it's going to take. How do you get it going? What's the energy around it? What's the one technician or two technicians you got to deal with in this? Start with them. Don't import a spreadsheet to begin. Do you think those are like navigate as we're navigating pitfalls? Is that something that you think if we were to advise someone who really doesn't have a seem to be started yet,
Mhm.
would you, to me, that's a good start? What am I
I
missing?
would say I would say, what do you need to run your business, and what services are critical for you to provide to run your business? And those are the ones to start with.
All right. So the other part of the pitfall is I remember way back in my history, and I go back a long ways. The gray hair, it's more, it's just a lot of years there.
I thought that was like, trust me, I thought you just dyed it.
Exactly, exactly. So we had a cable closet and we always laughed. It was a token ring. That's how far back this goes. It was token ring closet. When you open it up, something went out. Something would, something would be disconnected. So you never open that closet. So is there a risk that if you don't have all buy-in, which is a tough thing to have, are you just building a house of cards and you're saying, hey, it's stable until someone sneezes?
What you do is you just fire the people that disagree with you. No, I'm just kidding. No, you're unfortunately, it's not realistic. It's not always realistic, not always possible to have everybody agree with you. Sometimes you just have to disagree and commit. But I think it is outlining, here's what we're trying to do, here's the outcome. Do you agree this far?
Hmm.
You might not agree with how we're doing it. You might not agree with the method, but this is what we're going after. Do our worldviews at least align on what our goals are? And if the answer to that question is yes, drive towards that, go towards that. As for, let's say you're already in a CMDB that's in a live environment and you've got folks uploading spreadsheets, set up some kind of and it's important for business. Set up some kind of plan to figure out how you can transition away from that, but always focus on the outcome, focus on the vision, and drive towards that.
So reconciliation is a huge part of this. If you're tying in different systems, spreadsheets, discovery, tying in integration with other discovery tools, reconciliation, auditing, that's one way to avoid a pitfall is to continually have something. Do you have to have a data governance person that's just doing this? Or is there a way to tie it in to everyone who's in charge of various equipment, technologies, that they do it in their day? You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm just trying to think of what's the governance looks like? In a small company, say there's only two or three guys in IT, right? That they're just as important of equipment to monitor and govern as some big corporation, right? To them, it's still the same issues. How do you do that?
So what you do is you hire a consultant. No, just kidding.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think when you are trying to build something and govern something at scale and you have limited resources, the solution seems to be automation as much as possible. Business logic, business rules. How can we think through this process such that when something comes into the footprint, comes into the environment, what are the touch points it has to go through? And then what is the governance uh, was the logic that we would use to govern that device in this environment? Do we have GRC controls? Do we have policies? do we have an automation capability to apply those policies to these devices such that when they fall out of compliance, a task is generated or something is generated to note that? Do we have a certification process?
Hmm.
Is that biannually? Is it quarterly? Do we have to kind of think through what are your audit requirements? What are you beholden to? And then figure out kind of what parts of the platform you can leverage to put as much automation in front of that as you can and really only bubble up the stuff that needs manual human intervention. Kind of a ServiceNow example is something called control indicators. So in IRM, integrated risk management, you can set up control indicators to look at certain fields. And if a field isn't populated, that can raise something up. From a CMDB perspective, you have like health policies that you can set up against certain records, classes, etc. You have completeness scores. You have all these different ways to kind of perform data governance. And then there is, my memory is failing me here. I think there is a data governance module for CMDB where you can set up rules to also govern and manage that. So part one, use automation where you can, match it with what your audit risk governance requirements are, and then make sure it's on some kind of cadence. And you're probably going to have a naughty list somewhere. Make sure somebody is monitoring the naughty list.
Do you see change management being a big part of this? As far as, you're getting your approvals in, but tying assets and seem to be config items and relationships into these parts of your risk out of your backup plan, your backout plans. Do you see that also being a huge cog in this wheel to making sure that this thing keeps churning without having to do a lot of extra work?
Yeah, that's change is definitely part of this. I mean, from an operational perspective, you're changing your environment, you log change, and then that change should be reflected in your CMDB. So if you submit a change to decommission a server, the next time discovery goes through your environment, that server should no longer be online.
Hmm.
And you might have a policy or a control setup that says, hey, we have, we submitted a change. This server's supposed to be off, but this server's still live. Yeah, absolutely. Change is certainly a part of it, and it's kind of trust but verify. You submit the change, things should happen. Verify that with whatever your automation tooling is to make sure that thing happened.
So like I told you I don't want to add no more work to anybody, but this is sort of adding work, but it's not as tricky. So in a change request, you could put in there, I want to take this server down. We're going to decommission this server. We're going to move these apps to this server. We're changing where the apps are sitting. We're now decommissioning this hardware and we're taking it out. We're going to retire it. That's great in words, but you need some sort of checklist you didn't additionally need to do to say, did those apps show that they're on this new host? Did this hardware piece leave the environment and it did go dead? I mean, you have to have checkpoints to make sure that X, Y, and Z happened on your CMDB to know I did it. It's all right. Instead of later on someone saying, hey, I got a list of the server on it. What happened to it? Oh, go look at the change orders. That's more work, right? I'm actually saving a little bit of work by putting 10 minutes in here, and just spend a little bit more time to say, what do I need to audit and check on my change? I think that's the care and feeding that you need to do in your life structure. You know what I mean?
It's quality, it's checking for quality.
Yeah.
And much like when software is rolled out or your phone gets an update, you don't want to update your phone and it breaks. So when that change is submitted, as part of going through that change, just validating that, yes, this change was successful, it did work. And there should be some metrics around that as well, like successful changes versus failed changes, for example.
All right. So we're navigating CMDB. Here we are. We're closing this up a little bit here. We talked about small and tactical. That's an approach. Certifying that your data is correct along the way, right? If you're able to have a health dashboard, would save you a lot of time to find out where your pain points are, what you need to focus on next, or what's not working as you thought it would. Then you got to kind of layer in discovery, service, and change, service mappings and change. And you just got to live it. It's kind of like me and I keep on picking on myself, me and losing weight. It's got to be a life change. just make it part of it. Don't make it an extra step, something else you got to do, or else I won't do it. I got to make the change and live it. And I think CMDB, it's a living system,
Yes.
not anything you just do once a month and do a check. Otherwise, you are adding more work to your day. So then it gets into governance and training. How do you do your checks? How do you train people to do it right? This person isn't doing it real well. Well, why? I don't like to go in and say, hey, you're doing it wrong. Do it this way. I like to go in and say, you're not following what we put out there. What's happening that's causing this? Is it just because you don't know? Or is it because what we did is not practical? What we did is not
Yep.
reality, and maybe we need to change our procedures. So if we package that, I think I can avoid most of the pitfalls of CMD.
And I think the biggest thing, and you touched upon this, just don't overcomplicate it. Focus on the meaningful, focus on the valuable, and then go from there.
And go from there. Yeah, that's a good topic. Good topic. You know what? We'll probably dig in again in another episode, somewhat deeper on some of these topics. Maybe
Hmm.
even do another one. We'll say, hey, let's define what CMDB is. Is it keyboards, mouses, cables? We talked about that a little bit on the side, a little bit. So maybe we'll do a couple episodes here on that. But I think this is a good discussion. I hope people find it valuable. And I appreciate you joining me on this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, man. Take care.
Take it easy.